I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for the City of Springdale for December 18th, 2024. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Abba Father, as we enter this holiday season, let us be mindful of your promises kept, remembering all the Old Testament prophecies culminating in the birth of your Son, our promised Savior. Let us be thankful for the free gift of your grace, a second chance. Father God, let us also strive daily to be like your Son as we remember the true reason for this season. These things we ask thy Son's holy name. Amen.
Ms. Brown, if you take roll.
Mr. Gleaves.
Present.
Mr. Jacobs.
Present.
Ms. McFarland.
Present.
Mrs. Sullivan-Weiskup. Mr. Vanover.
Present.
Mrs. Webster. Mr. Anderson.
Present. We do have a quorum with 5 members present. The other 2 council members are under the weather and won't be with us tonight. So we'll carry on. Next up on the agenda, council, in your package you had the minutes for the December 4th, 2024 meeting. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions, discussions, or corrections? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions. All right, the minutes are approved with 5 affirmative votes. And I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say 7 at least one more time tonight and get the count wrong just out of habit. All right, moving right along, we'll get into committee and official reports. We'd like to start out tonight with Civil Service Commission. Mr. Coleman, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. President, Council. Civil Service Commission did meet on December the 5th. All members were present, which was Mrs. Starby, Ms. McNair, myself, along with Ms. Morgan, Mr. Ewell, and Ms. Edwards. The meeting was somewhat of a brief meeting, as it was a recap of our hiring processes. That included the building inspector hiring process, fire lieutenant promotional process, patrol officer hiring process, and the police clerk hiring process, along with the public works hiring process. So the good news is the majority of those departments are in pretty good shape. The hiring is in place. Candidates have been selected. Background checks were moving forward, and going into the end of the year, I'd say we're in pretty good shape with fulfillment of the positions. So hopefully we won't see the revolving door next year as we've seen this year. But again, like I said, I think we're ending the year on a good note. The only other unfinished business that we had was a review of the job descriptions for the facility maintenance 1, the facility maintenance 2, the facilities and grounds superintendent, and the parks maintenance supervisor. Those job descriptions were reviewed and approved so that we could conclude that aspect of the business. So again, things are moving forward in pretty good shape. Any questions?
I don't see any tonight. Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
You're welcome.
All right, next up, Rules and Law, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
Finance Committee, Mr. Vanover.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Committee met on the 12th of December, and we reviewed and unanimously approved the budget document you have before us, and we heartily ask for your support on this.
All right, thank you, and we'll go through that in detail in a little bit here. All right, next up, Planning Commission, Ms. McFarland.
Sorry, I forgot I was supposed to do that tonight. Ms. Sullivan-Weiskup was not available at the meeting, so we did discuss our appointment of positions. So the chairman was reappointed as Dave Oakham, the vice chair as Steve Galster, and the secretary as Joe Ramirez. We did get a packet from the building department for the Springdale Thoroughfare Plan. That's going to be covered at our January meeting. We had two things before us. The first one was a daycare at 140 West Kemper Road. We did approve that at 6-0 vote. That will be Millennium Creative Committee. And they will move into the other side of the doctor's office. And then the second one was a townhome development. It was just a concept plan review at 345 Glen Springs Drive. And that was looking to be a neighborhood mixed use. There's definitely some concerns for it being in a floodplain. There's sewer line concerns. There's a sanitary sewer overflow there. They were looking to have 35 3-bedroom plus den townhomes. So that is still in process. They understand that's a very difficult piece of land to develop. So the owners of it are still working on it. So, and that's all we had.
All right, don't see any questions? Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Mr. Gleaves.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Board of Zoning Appeals met in these chambers at 7 p.m. November 26. We had 6 present and 1 absent. We had old business, 2 variances. The first variance for BZA application 20240570 Sunoco image upgrade at 12089 Princeton Road. The property owners are requesting the following variance: to allow wall signage of 209 square feet where 57.5 square feet is the maximum permitted per zoning code section 153.459C2A. That variance did not pass. It was a 3-vote yes, 3-vote no. The second variance was to allow electronic fuel sign display with 2 colors, red and green, to differentiate diesel and regular fuel, where zoning code section 153.460D3 requires the use of 1 color. That passed by a 6-0 vote. New business was BZA application 2024-0643 Tico Tax at 284 Northland Boulevard. This application had 2 variances. The first was to allow wall signage without channel cut letters in violation of zoning code 153.459. 2D, which requires all wall-mounted signs to be channel cut letters. The second variance was to allow a total of 108 square feet of wall signage where 52.22 square feet is maximum permitted per section 153.4592A. These 2 variances were continued because the applicant did not have clarity on the documents that were presented. One of the documents that was presented was not the document that the occupants thought that it was. And then the other issue was that the BZA questionnaire that is normally filled out by an applicant wasn't filled out at all. So we, in good faith, allowed this applicant to adhere to the things that wasn't done and come back and do this again at our, I think it's a January 28th meeting. Yeah, the January 28th meeting. So that is all I have. Is there any questions?
No, only to note that's unusual. Typically, the building department would catch those missing questionnaires before it comes. So I know there's a lot of transition there. So hopefully we get through it in January. All right, anything else for BZA? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Board of Health. Ms. McFarland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board of Health met last Tuesday in these chambers. The first thing we had was a resolution for Dr. Ketchering. He has served 30 plus years on the Board of Health, and this past meeting was his last meeting. He has decided to move on. and focus on some family things. So we will miss him greatly. He's brought a lot of knowledge to the Board of Health over the years. COVID cases, we still had less than last year. We've had 19 so far this quarter. Not too much in the food program update. Obviously, construction has started on Wawa, and the remodel on Mi Cozumel in the old Fridays is still pending. We did get some updates from the health department on their emergency preparedness plans. They're working on enhancing that program, on updating plans and staff trainings for the city going forward in the event of another COVID situation or anything like that. We did have a personnel update. Several of our fall interns will be back in the spring. And I believe that's all.
All right, Mr. Gleaves, was question?
No, Mr. President, I made a mistake here. I'm still stuck on December 24th when our normal BZA meeting is. We had a meeting last night. May I report that, please?
Yeah, are we done with the health report? I didn't see any questions. We can go back and go ahead and give us the rest of the report for last night's meeting.
Okay, sorry about that. The normal BZA meeting, which was scheduled for December 24th, was last night, December 27th. And we had 6 present and 1 absent. And we had 2 cases of new business. The first was BZA application 2024-0666, Springdale Elementary fence variance at 350 West Kemper Road. The property owners are requesting the following variance: to allow a chain link fence to be installed where fences are required to be constructed out of wood, vinyl, wrought iron, aluminum, or other similar materials per section 153.253 E5C3 of the Springdale zoning code. That application passed at a 5-0. One was recused, but it passed by a motion of 5-0. The second one was BZA application 2024-0706, garage into living space variance at 171 Balsam Court. The property owners are requesting the following variance: to allow for a residential single household to have a 0-car garage where 1 car is minimum garage size is permitted per table 252-2 of the Springdale zoning code. This motion, a motion was made to disapprove this, and it passed 5-1, so that variance did not get approved. I apologize for the mistake, and that's all I have.
All right, I think we're good. All right, we'll move on. Then capital improvements, Ms. Ellen Wisecup had no report for that. There was no meeting related. Next up was OKI. That's myself. The meeting for December was canceled. The next OKI meeting isn't scheduled until January. Next up, we have the mayor's report. Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. On December the 2nd, we had a tree lighting here at the municipal building. The second graders from Springdale Elementary came and sang, and they did an amazing job. We also had a visit from Santa Claus, and everyone was very excited about that. Chief and I even got to sit on Santa's lap and ask for some things for the holidays coming up. December 7th, we had the Santa 5K in Vendors Village, and we had a great crowd there at the rec center. A lot of activities going on, and everyone had a good time. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, and I can attest, I know Charlie Wilson's in the audience too, that the Vendor Village was excellent again this year, and the entire 5K, the way Elizabeth puts all that together and the team is really, really great for the community, so thank you for that. All right, next up, Administrator's Report, Mr. Yule. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Vanover, I missed that light.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just jump on the bandwagon, and I talked to Mr. Wilson already, but we were in a neighboring community, and they had a vendor market, and ours was far superior, and this is one of the upper echelon communities. And we had much more variety in it. So hats off, and you know, Elizabeth and the whole gang down there, they did a phenomenal job, and keep it up.
Yeah, it really is wonderful for the community. So, all right, next up, we have the administrator's report. Mr. Yule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real quick, I just want to recognize Ms. Morgan for her work in this year's budget, or the 2025 budget, rather, and also the work that our department heads put into compiling all the necessary documentation to kind of move forward and compile all this in a short amount of time, but also in respect to your time and commitment with the departments that you lead, but also being good stewards of public funds. As reflected in where we're kind of ending 2024 and what we hope to do in 2025. So thank you to all of you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And I know we'll get to the budget in a minute, but it is worth noting, since you brought it up, there are a number of new department heads this year as well, and new turnover in administration, and this budget didn't skip a beat. This is excellent work. Now, we'll go through it still with a fine-tooth comb and ask our questions, but at least presentation-wise, it's really excellent. So not a step was missed. All right, next up, Law Director's report, Mr. Braun.
Thank you, Mr. President. The only thing I'll report is that we'll be preparing a summary in January of the law changes that went into effect and circulating those. And other than that, I have nothing else to report.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Riggs.
Thank you. So 2 items tonight. We got the Northland Boulevard project. Unfortunately, the contractor was not able to switch over traffic into the I guess that would be the eastbound lane as originally hoped. I think the weather got to them. So they're looking to resume work sometime in March and then make that switch in May. So they changed their schedule a little bit on us. The other project, the Tri-County sidewalk project, construction's probably about 85% complete. The plan was to get it done by the end of the week, but again, the weather's not cooperating. So hopefully they'll still be able to get it done. There's only a few items left, but it may be the following week or shortly after Christmas before it gets completed. That's all I had.
All right, don't see any lights. Thank you. We'll move on to the Rental Program Committee, Mr. Vanover.
Thank you, Mr. President. The rental committee met on December the 3rd, and we are nearing the end of an arduous project. We will have recommendations coming to council next month, but I want to thank everybody for digging in both this section and the first section. I think we've got some real work done and accomplished. So with that, we'll see that in January.
All right, don't see any questions. Thank you. Next, Urban Farming Special Committee, Ms. McFarland.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Urban Farming Committee met on Wednesday, November 27th. We did take into consideration some motions made from the Planning Commission meeting, and we presented those at the last council meeting. We did move to make some changes to that. We will have a public hearing and vote on that, and hopefully finish that committee up at our next meeting in January.
All right, and there's a public hearing set for that already, so we should be set. Yes. All right. All right, that ends committee and official reports. Next, we'll move on to communications. Ms. Bauer, are there any communications for council tonight?
Thank you, Mr. President. No communications.
All right, next up, we have communications from the audience. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience that would like to address council for any reason. Simply come forward, state your name and address, and you can address council for up to 5 minutes. The floor is now open.
Good evening, Julie Tudor. I'm here to report that the Charter Revision had their annual meeting as prescribed by the Charter on Wednesday, December 4th. All 5 members were in attendance. Mayor Hawkins swore in our newest member, Michelle Miller. And we had elections. I was reelected to be the chairperson, and Michelle Miller will also be the secretary this coming year. And thank you very much. And on a side note, I'd like to thank Mr. Vanover for his very appropriate invocation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. The floor is still open for communications. If anyone else would like to address council. Second call. Third and final call. And I'm closing communications from the audience. Next up on the agenda is the presentation of the 2025 budget with much fanfare. Mr. Vanover.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, first off, and accolades to staff and department heads. Not only did they get this put together in a timely manner, but we are finishing the year almost $2 million under budget. That is definitely something to be proud of. That's a lot of work and a lot of concern, and that shows to the public that we are good stewards of what they give us. And from the Finance Committee, I appreciate that very, very much. We're going to have an estimated $5.4 million carryover into the next year. Now, this will probably be the last for a run of that size, unless they do an outstanding job again and we see some influx in revenue coming in, because we have learned, as in the past, that sometimes putting off a project is costly. So we're trying to get the projects completed and worked in the current budget year. Our revenues for this, for 2024 are projected at $23,209,094. And I was thinking when I was going over before the Finance Committee meeting, I can remember when we were looking at the one I remember the clearest was a $15 million budget. So we've grown the budget almost $10 million, and that's, reflected around us. And we expect to see it continue to grow. Since 2020, the city has seen over $454 million in new development and redevelopment projects. And that speaks, as Ms. Brower and I were talking before, the realization that Springdale still is a viable place to be, and that we will continue to uphold that as we move forward. Other notes, in the intro, we've grant funding. Our department heads are doing a phenomenal job of capturing grants and putting that to use. We are welcoming that, and I have said grants are our money. It's money that we've passed on, and we're recapturing that back in. So there's nothing to look down about a grant. We've got the only other highlight or comment, our street improvement bonds. We've got payment projected for 2025 of $712,050. And with that, we'll start through section by section. First off, the police department. One little quick note on the proposed budget, the police personal service. There's a jump there, but part of that is driven by the fact that we have 27 pays this year. So it kind of looks like it's skewed, but it's just the way that the calendar is breaking out. So any questions there? All right, fire department. All right. Health department. Parks and Recreation. Okay, Building Department. right, next one's waste collection budget. Public Works. Administrative office budget. Okay, Economic Development Department, their budget. Finance Department. Okay, legislative body budget. Other commissions that would include civil service, cable TV regulatory and contractual services, their budget. Tax Department. General Administration budget. All right, transfers and advances. Cameron and Underwood Parks. All right, Adult Sports Fund budget. Street Maintenance Fund budget. State Highway Improvement. Just a quick note while we're there, we were checking, as of this date, and as my grandfather would say, good Lord willing, the creek don't rise, our salt dome is completely full, and we're hoping that we have a mild, snow-free winter. The Ohio Opioid Fund budget. Grants Fund budget. Court Computerization Fund budget. Springdale Youth Boosters. Merchant Street TIF Fund. Sheraton Lane TIF Fund. Commerce Park TIF. Drug Enforcement Fund. Law Enforcement Fund. DUI Fund. Law Enforcement Training Fund. Insurance Trust Fund. Health Insurance Trust Fund. Our Street Improvement Debt Fund. Capital Improvements Fund. All right. Residential Recycling Fund. Parks and Urban Forestry Fund.
I think we missed the Tri-County Mall TIF Fund, but I suspect that we're fine there. Did I miss it? I skipped ahead. Carry on. Oh, I'm missing that page. That's why.
There's nothing there anyway.
I'm missing that page. That's why I missed it. It's not in the copy that was printed out. I go right from, keep going.
Northwest Business Center, TIF. Yeah. All right, the one we all hope for, the Unclaimed Monies Fund.
Mr. Vanover, I think, did you have a Parks and Urban Forestry Fund in there?
We did the
On
Urban
185?
Forestry, yes.
Okay, and then Northwest Business Center TIF
Northwest
fund?
Business.
Okay, and then we're on unclaimed monies. Is everyone caught up? Everyone, we're on page 193?
Yeah. Unclaimed monies is on 193. OBBS Assessment Fund. And then the Fire Insurance Proceeds Fund. That covers and concludes the expenditures. You've got the revenues. All right, and then the last section are fund summaries. And that kind of breaks it down, ties everything back up. So with that, unless there's any further questions, that is our proposed 2025 budget that we are recommending to council.
And I'll say again, I know we do say this every year, when it gets to the point that it's up here at council, it's already been through a number of revisions and reviews, finance committee reviews. Council's had an opportunity to see it at a time and ask detailed questions. So this page turning is a final test, a final question. It's in no way the only review that happens. I do want to say again how much I appreciate the amount of work that goes into this every year. This is a professional budget. This is serious. The way that it's done is excellent. I would match it against any Fortune 25 company I've worked for and any city around us in terms of the level of detail, diligence, and information that's captured in our budget. If anyone has questions about how it's used or what projects are planned, all they have to do is pull up this document that's usually available on the website a couple weeks after the meeting, and there's detail for both mission statements for every budget, comments for significant items. It is complete. So again, I know we said it before, but it's a lot of work, and it is appreciated, and it is looked at, and it is used by a lot of people, so thank you. All right, Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to piggyback and thank our department director heads. We've got the best department directors around, and this is something that takes months that goes into, and they're on the cutting room floor with their department staff and working through all those things before it comes to administration, gets sent back, and they go back and work through it again. Also want to note, because the people at home may not see, but we have department heads who are present with us today for the meeting, and I'm very appreciative that nobody got up and left after the department was called. And so we appreciate you sticking around. Also want to say again, thank you to Ms. Morgan for all her work that she goes through. You know, we sat there when she's going through the paper part, and it's like, do you need any help? Can we sit and help put some of these together? And it's like, no, just if you guys get out of the way, it'll go a lot faster. So we left her alone. The last thing I do want to note is, you know, when you guys look at page 2, and Mr. Vanover was going over this some, but it's important and is worth repeating. When you look at the pie chart with regard to the biggest majority of where our money comes from in terms of earning tax, this goes back to, again, this is not serendipity, this is intentional with regard to increasing our population and bringing people into our city. This is a mission that this administration has, prior councils had, and I hope this council continues to have, but it's very, very important. 82% is going to come from earning tax. So if we have more people here that are working and generating money, that's more revenue that's going to come into our coffers that we're going to be able to provide more services within. So just want to note that in terms of the budget and what's important. Thank you.
All right, final call for any questions or comments on the presentation of the budget. All right, thank you. We'll move on. And I think you beat last year's time by, I think, 2 minutes. So thank you for that. We're now on ordinances and resolutions. Before we get into the first ordinance, the chair is open to a motion to amend our agenda to add Resolution R15 2024, which would be a resolution appointing a member to civil service. In the past, we had talked about waiting until January for these opens, but I believe that Civil Service Commission is meeting the morning of or the afternoon of our next meeting, so that vacancy would be good to be approved.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion about adding it to the agenda? Seeing none, Ms. Browder, if you poll council on adding Resolution R15 2024 to the agenda.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
And Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. The motion to add a Resolution R15 2024 to the agenda has been approved with 5 affirmative votes. I'm now passing out at the dais a copy of that. We will insert this into the agenda at the end of ordinances and resolutions. So you can just take one and pass it down. And I believe the next one is R15. So when you read it, it'll be R15. All right. And with that business out of the way, we will move on to ordinance number 62, 2024. This is a second reading. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 62, 2024. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with CT Consultants for design engineering for the East Kemper Road Improvement Phase 1 project for the city of Springdale, Ohio. Whereas the city of Springdale, Ohio, the city is planning a multi-phase project for the improvement of East Kemper Road. And whereas the city has been awarded funding to cover the majority of the estimated cost for construction of the Phase 1 project. And whereas the city seeks to enter into an agreement with CT Consultants for engineering services related to the construction. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring, Section 1, that the mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with CT Consultants for completion of design engineering for the East Kemper Road Improvement Project Phase 1 for the city of Springdale, the proposal. A copy of the proposal is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that the Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is hereby authorized to pay CT Consultants an amount not to exceed $210,000 for completion of the East Kemper Road Improvement Project Phase 1 design engineering as outlined in the proposal. Section 3, Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 62, 2024. It is a second reading. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
All right, I have Mr. Vanover as the motion maker and Mr. Jacobs as the second. All right, questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, Ms. Browder, if you poll council.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 62, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right, next up we have ordinance number 63, 2024. It does have the emergency clause. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 63, 2024. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a development agreement with respect to the Springdale Cinema project, the execution of ancillary development-related documents, including a school compensation agreement with the Princeton City School District and Joint Vocational School District, and a cooperative agreement with one or more port authorities, and declaring an emergency. Whereas Springdale Cinema LLC, an Indiana limited liability company, the developer, desires to enter into a development agreement with the City of Springdale, the development agreement, a copy of which is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated here by reference, pertaining to the development of REIT property located at 505 West Crescentville Road within the City of Springdale and generally known as the Springdale Cinema Site, the project site, into approximately 216 market rate apartment units, approximately 90 for-rent townhome units, and appurtenant parking and amenities as more fully set forth in the development agreement, the project. And whereas the city's Department of Economic Development has recommended a 30-year real property tax exemption for the project pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 5709.40, the TIF Act, subject to the passage by council of a separate ordinance authorizing such exemption, the project TIF and the TIF ordinance as applicable. And whereas the city's Department of Economic Development has further recommended the entering into of the development agreement by the city for the purpose of fostering the orderly development of the project site in a manner consistent with the city's economic development goals. And whereas, And whereas the city has determined that it is in the best interest of the city to enter into the development agreement and consummate the transaction set forth herein, because the city will receive substantial economic and non-economic benefits from the project, and that the project will create jobs, stimulate economic growth in the city, increase the city's housing stock, and enable the project site to be put to its highest and best use for the benefit of the people of the city. And whereas Section 13 of Article 8 of the Ohio Constitution provides that to create or preserve jobs and employment opportunities and to improve the economic welfare of the people of the state, it is a public interest and proper public purpose for the state or its political subdivisions to lend aid or credit for industry, commerce, distribution, and research. And whereas Section 16 of Article 8 of the Ohio Constitution provides that it is in the public interest and a proper public purpose for the city to enhance the availability of adequate housing and to improve the economic and general well-being of the people of the city by providing or assisting in providing housing. And whereas the city believes that the project will promote development in the city, is in the vital and best interests of the city and the health, safety, and welfare of its residents, and is in accordance with the public purposes and provisions of applicable federal, state, and local laws and requirements. And whereas the Board of Education of the Princeton City School District, the school district, and the Great Oaks Institute of Technology and Career Development, the JVSD, have agreed to enter into a school compensation agreement, a copy of which is attached as Exhibit B and incorporated by reference, the school compensation agreement, authorizing, among other things, tax increment financing and other tax incentive programs contemplated under the development agreement for the redevelopment of the project site. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring, that the recitals to this ordinance are incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that the mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to execute the development agreement with the developer in substantially the form attached as Exhibit A pertaining to the development of the project site into approximately 216 market rate apartment units, approximately 90 for-rent townhome units, and opportunity parking and amenities, all as more fully set forth herein. Section 3, that the mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to execute the school compensation agreement with the school district and the JVSD in substantially the form attached as Exhibit A pertaining to tax increment financing and other tax incentive programs applicable to the project site. Section 4, the council authorizes the appropriate city officials to take all necessary and proper actions to fulfill the terms of this ordinance, the development agreement, the school compensation agreement, any and all project-related documents described in the development agreement and or school compensation agreement, including but not limited to execution by the mayor and city administrator of 1, any service agreement described herein necessary to secure the bonds as more fully defined in the development agreement. 2, any cooperative agreement described therein necessary to effect a pledge of the service payments in lieu of taxes resulting from the project TIF to the Ohio Port Authorities within the meaning of Ohio Revised Code Chapter 4582, issuing the TIF bonds. And 3, all ancillary agreements, amendments, and other documents necessary to place into effect the school compensation agreement, development agreement, service agreement, and cooperative agreement, all as deemed necessary or appropriate by the mayor. Section 5, that is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of council concerning and relating to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of any of its committees which resulted in such formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22. Section 6, this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D, 3D of the Charter, be effective immediately. The reason for the declaration of emergency is the immediate need to enable the parties to execute the development agreement and school compensation agreement as soon as possible so the developer can promptly move forward with the project, thereby creating a significant economic benefit and enhancement to the city at the earliest possible time. Section 7, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 63, 2024. It does have the emergency clause. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. So I know we have a number of items related to the cinema projects, and I know the developers here. Is this a good time to have a presentation from them? So at this point, the developer is here for the cinema projects, and they had a bunch of information they wanted to share with council related to this item as well as several others we're seeing tonight. So I invite the developer up to share the exciting news and pictures of what's coming.
Thank you. Spencer Lee, 4517 Central Avenue, Indianapolis. I want to start, thank Mayor Hawkins, Andy, Brian, Melissa, Carl, Sean, Andy, again, because of how many times I've been on the phone with him over the last year to see this project to get where it is. I know it's being read in an emergency resolution, but I don't think it's new to anyone, or, you know, we've been working on it for about a year, maybe longer to get it to here. So thank you everyone who's you know, provided input, Planning Commission, you guys as well. I'll start just quickly. We have some really good pictures, I guess, up here as well, but wanted to talk first about kind of the site plan. There's been, you know, small tweaks along the way as we've gone through and getting all the approvals we need to start building. The pond in the northeast corner is a wet detention pond now. It was maybe 6 months ago we made that switch from dry to wet. Some other changes from this picture to kind of what we're proposing. You may be able to see if you, I think I can do this. Zoom in right there. You see all the AC units. Those will all be on the roofs because of the bigger buildings, because they're flat roofs, so we can put the AC units up there. They'll be properly screened. A couple other small tweaks, the multi-use path along the north side. We've tried to take that back off the road a little bit to provide some buffer. We feel like that's a better environment to be riding and walking with kids, things like that. So where we can, we've pulled it back off the road a little. It looks pretty tight within that image up, except where we're near that path or near the pond because of the elevation changes there. It's going to be pretty tight to the sidewalk. Touching a little bit more on the site plan, we're over 2-to-1 parked. That was a hot button issue through the summer. Added some parking on the southeast side of the site to really hone in on where we kind of felt like it was tight for specific residents. And then just kind of talking about the project as a whole, we developed the Array project across the street, and what we tried to do is differentiate ourselves from that project just so that we weren't competing with ourselves for tenants. Some of the things we did is the townhomes that we don't have over there. The other thing is our unit mix here. We have a number, we have from pretty small studios up to those almost 2,000 square foot townhomes when you include the garage space. So we've differentiated the product there so that we can broaden the resident profile. You know, someone who's really budget conscious would be in one of those studios living alone, maybe in their 20s, right out of college, something like that. But they could stay in this project for, you know, a pretty long time, depending on what they were looking for, because we have 4 different types of 1-bedroom units, some with dens, some with dining rooms, things like that. So really trying to differentiate the unit mix that we're offering here was the goal compared to the Array project across the street. And then within the site, this is a much bigger site than Array, so we have 4 outdoor amenity spaces that are built out for the residents, 2 different dog parks, bike racks, again, a much more green space than you're seeing across the street, just because we were able to provide that. Within the development, we have a resident lounge, fitness center, co-working space, focus rooms for people who work from home but they want to get out of their apartment, and they can go into one of those rooms and sit there and work for the day or a half a day. A conference room, a maker space, which is something where we'll have like power tools and things like that they can use if they want to. Oftentimes we see residents use it when they're building furniture, but also if we have artists that work there, they'll go into those maker spaces. A dog spa, package room. Those are some of the amenities that we'll provide. Many of them we have across the street, but some of them are unique to this project, especially the outdoor space that we're providing. And then, the last thing I wanted to touch on is, as kind of Mayor Hawkins talked about, the providing housing for the community. What we've learned at Array is, we have the primary employers of the tenant base there are Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Mercy Health, Hamilton County, Northrop Grumman, Fifth Third Bank, Procter & Gamble Aviation. So it's businesses within the community. We have 2 police officers, 1 firefighter, 8 nurses, and 12 people working in education. So it's teachers, it's nurses, it's people in the community. And the big thing there, we have about 70% of our residents are making between $40,000 and $125,000. So this is middle income housing that we're providing, and that's the same thing that we would be offering here. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. I kind of stayed on the site plan. I can talk a little bit about the images here. So this is actually the 3-bedroom or the 3-story flat apartments that we will provide. So each floor and each couple of sets of windows is a unit. This is down that main road looking west, and off in the right corner is where the pickleball court would be. And then this is that kind of where that right corner looking back east with the 2-story townhomes that have a different pitch of the roof as opposed to the flat roof on the bigger buildings. And those are differentiated with the roof lines, but similar paint, siding material to kind of tie the site together and really make it feel like one community. And then this is the central greenway down the middle of the townhomes. We think, as the image depicts, like this will be the place where a lot of people just go out and kind of can sit in the lawn, throw a football or a frisbee or something like that, let their kids run around or their dog. And then I don't know that we need to get into this, but parking has been a big thing. So we added a decent number of parking within the townhomes specifically to help better serve some of those buildings. And I guess with that, I'll open it up for questions. This is the smallest studio this is a small studio at a different project. Trying to show that it seems small at 580 square feet, but you can really make that space feel cozy and comfortable for a resident.
So first, thank you for coming out and sharing the pictures with us. There's been a lot of interest in, when we talk about it, what is actually happening there. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Mm-hmm. Did you, assuming everything gets passed the way we expect or want, or that you would want, do you have a forecast for construction and opening?
We would start construction in early February. It's assuming everything passes here. There's kind of a last. The bonds have to get approved by the port, and then they have a marketing process that they have to go through. So I think the earliest would be the first week of February, and that's when we would be attempting to start construction. We're ready to go. Our construction team is itching to get back here, and we have some members of our construction team from Cincinnati driving to Columbus for a job, and they would much rather be working here and not making that commute. So yeah, the start in February. We're about 14 months to first units and 26 months to finish the project. So May of 2027 we'd be fully done with construction.
I've been around enough construction to not hold you to that, but thank you for the forecast and being brave and saying that out loud.
Yeah.
Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. And along those lines, the first thing I want to say was appreciate your patience, because when we're talking about when things should happen, I know they wanted to have happen probably 6 months ago, if not more. So there have been a lot of different things that have gotten in the way and slowing this process down, but it's been a long time coming. It's an exciting project. Can't wait to go and tour this, like your other project that got to go through. You guys do excellent work. And the other thing is, really appreciate your receptiveness to feedback and making adjustments in the early stages with administration. I know you said Andy twice, you should say Andy 3 times, but the feedback, I know sometimes it wasn't everything that everybody wanted to hear, but you guys were receptive to it with administration, and then when it went through Planning Commission, same thing. There was discussion about more green space and more parking. I know you go, well, how am I supposed to have more green space and more parking? You find a way to go and make that happen. So really, really appreciate your receptiveness. Everybody who's been on Council and Planning Commission has seen folks come through as developers, and some blatantly don't listen to what's being asked. You did a great job with regard to this. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for the product that you've produced.
Springdale's been a great community to work with on the project, and we wouldn't be able to develop something without your support. So everyone has opinions. We're going to try and take as many as we can into consideration. And sometimes, some of the best ideas come from people that aren't thinking about the project every day. So,
Mr. Gleaves.
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome back.
thanks.
Could you go back to slide 14, please?
Yeah, the page numbers, was it that one?
That one right there,
Yes.
14.
Okay.
The railing around there at the bottom is,
Yes.
are you able or a resident able to sit out there? Or is that just like for security?
Like behind the railing?
No, the railing itself. It looks like it's in front of some units.
Yes, so a few of the units will have kind of private green spaces in front of their front door, essentially, and that's to allow those will be in high demand for residents that have pets, so they can just let their dog out and have them run back. So that will be space that they can use. There'll be some greenery in there as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Ms. McFarland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just kind of repeat some of the stuff that Mayor said. I know Ms. Sullivan-Weisskopf isn't here tonight, but Planning Commission working with you guys, I wasn't around for the array, but we appreciate you guys listening and being open to the feedback, and it was an exciting process, so I'm excited to see it go up, hopefully.
Don't see any other lights. One last question, though, for you in terms of occupancy at the array across the street.
Mhm.
You're still seeing strong demand for those?
Yeah, we're over, or I think we're 91, 92% occupied, and turning over, seeing pretty good stickiness, residents staying there when their first lease expires. So, yeah,
Great.
it's all going well there.
All right. I don't see any other questions for you. Thank you for coming out again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Last call again for council for questions on, again, we're on ordinance number 63, 2024. All right, and before we get to the vote, I just want to give a reminder to council that since this does have the emergency clause, it will require a supermajority of council to pass tonight, in spite of the fact of missing 2 people. It means the only way this would pass is with 5 affirmative votes. A vote of 4 would still pass the ordinance, but it would lose the emergency clause and be delayed for an action. Anything less than that, it would fail. Just so you're aware of your options. I'm in no way exerting pressure, just so you understand the process. All right, and with that, I see no more lights. Ms. Browder, if you poll council on ordinance number 63, 2024.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 63, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes. Next, we'll move on to ordinance number 64, 2024. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 64, 2024, an ordinance declaring improvements to parcels of real property located in Springdale, Ohio to be public purpose under section 5709.40B of the Ohio Revised Code, exempting such improvements from real property taxation, declaring certain public improvements to be necessary for the further development of those parcels, establishing a tax increment equivalent fund, and declaring an emergency. Whereas prior to the passage of this ordinance, the City of Springdale, the city, authorized the execution of a development agreement with Springdale Cinema LLC developer, the development agreement pertaining to certain parcels of real property more fully described on Exhibit A attached to this ordinance, the property, as authorized by ordinance number 2024, passed by this council on December 18th, 2024, the development agreement ordinance. And whereas sections 5709.40, 5709.42, and 5709.43, the TIF statutes, provide that council may, 1, declare by ordinance to be a public purpose any improvement as defined in Ohio Revised Code section 5709.40, and hereinafter the improvement, to a parcel of real property, and thereby authorize the exemption of such improvements from real property taxation for a period of time. 2, require the payment of service payments in lieu of taxes by the owner or owners of the parcel. And 3, establish a tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of those service payments. And whereas the city has determined that it is necessary and appropriate in furtherance of the city's economic development activities and in the best interest of the city to provide for exemption of the improvement to the property from real property taxation and for the payment of semi-annual service payments in lieu of taxes with respect to the property pursuant to Ohio Revised Code sections 5709.40B to 5709.43. And Whereas notice was given to the Princeton City School District, the school district, and Great Oaks Institute of Technology and Career Development, the JVSD, on December 4th, 2024, of the consideration of this ordinance providing for tax increment property tax exemption as required by sections 5709.40 and 5709.83 of the Ohio Revised Code. And whereas the school district forwarded a certified copy of a resolution of its Board of Education to the city, which resolution approved the actions of the city provided by this ordinance on the condition that the city and school district enter into a compensation agreement in substantially the form attached as Exhibit B to the Development Agreement Ordinance, the School Compensation Agreement. And whereas the city has authorized the School Compensation Agreement pursuant to the Development Agreement Ordinance, and whereas the council has determined that it is necessary and appropriate and in the best interest of the city to exempt from taxation the improvements located within the property as permitted and provided in section 5709.40B of the Ohio Revised Code, and to simultaneously direct and require the owners of the property to make service payments in lieu of taxes as provided by this ordinance. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, pursuant to section 5709.40B of the Ohio Revised Code, this council hereby creates the Springdale Cinema TIF, the boundaries of which shall be coexistence with the boundaries of the property and shall include the parcels constituting the property as specifically identified and depicted in Exhibit A attached hereto, which parcels are located in the incorporated area of the city, each such parcel being herein after a parcel. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and declares that certain public infrastructure improvements in the city, including land acquisition in aid of industry, commerce, distribution, or research, certain parking facilities, roadway, sewer, stormwater, water, utility, streetscape, traffic studies, and other related and opportune public infrastructure improvements, all as further described in Exhibit B attached hereto and made a part hereof, the public improvements, are necessary for the further development of the parcels of land described in Exhibit A attached to this ordinance and for the creation of jobs, enhancing the availability of adequate housing, increasing property values, and the provision of adequate traffic control in the city of Springdale. The further development of the parcels in the Springdale Cinema TIF will place direct additional demand on the public improvements. Section 3, that pursuant to section 5709.40B of the Ohio Revised Code, improvements to the parcels in the Springdale Cinema TIF occurring after the date of this ordinance are hereby declared to be a public purpose and are exempt from real property taxation commencing for each parcel with the first tax year that begins after the effective date of this ordinance, in which an improvement resulting from the construction of a structure on that parcel first appears on the tax duplicate of real and public utility property, and ends on the earlier of 1, 30 years after such date, or 2, the date on which the city can no longer require service payments to be paid on the improvements, all in accordance with the requirement of the TIF statutes, or 3, the date on which the public improvements are paid in full from the tax increment equivalent fund as defined in section 5 hereof, but in no case shall the improvements be exempted from taxation for more than 30 years. It is hereby determined that 100% of the improvements shall be exempt from real property taxation, and the public improvements directly benefit, or once made will directly benefit, the Springdale Cinema TIF. Section 4, that pursuant to section 5709.42 of the Ohio Revised Code, the owner or the owners of the parcel shall be required to make semi-annual service payments in lieu of taxes, the service payments, to the Hamilton County Treasurer on or before the final dates for payment of real property taxes. This council hereby expresses its intention and authorizes the mayor and/or city administrator to sign such documents as may be necessary and appropriate to provide for the collection of such service payments. Section 5, that pursuant to section 5709.43 of the Ohio Revised Code, there is hereby established the Springdale Cinema Public Improvement Tax Increment Equivalent Fund, the Tax Increment Equivalent Fund, into which the service payment shall be deposited. Money in the Tax Increment Equivalent Fund shall be used to finance the public improvements, including but not limited to, in the manner described in the development agreement, and may be used to make payments to the Princeton City School District and or the Great Oaks Institute of Technology and Career Development at the discretion of the council. Section 6, that the proper city officials are hereby authorized to do all things necessary and proper to carry out sections 1 through 5 above, including but not limited to filing any required applications for tax exemption with the Hamilton County Auditor and or the State Tax Commissioner. Section 7, that the Clerk of Council is hereby directed to forward a copy of this ordinance to the Auditor of Hamilton County, Ohio. Section 8, pursuant to section 5709.40 of the Ohio Revised Code, the Clerk of Council is hereby directed to deliver a copy of this ordinance to the Director of the Department of Development of the State of Ohio within 15 days after its passage. On or before March 31st, 31st of each year that the exemption set forth herein remains in effect, the clerk of council or authorized officer of the city shall prepare and submit to the director of the Department of Development of the State of Ohio the status report required under Section 5709.40 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 9, that it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 10, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D, 3D of the city's charter, be in full force and effective immediately upon adoption. The reason for the emergency is to allow the exemption to be approved and effective expeditiously to allow for the construction of public improvements in a timely fashion as contemplated in the development agreement.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 64, 2024. It does have the emergency clause. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's a race, but once again, I believe Mr. Jacobs is who I heard first as the second. All right. Questions or discussion related? Did we want to do the whole presentation again? No? All right. See no lights. Ms. Brown, if you poll council.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 64, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right. Next up, we have ordinance number 65, 2024. It also has the emergency clause. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 65, 2024. An ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a community reinvestment agreement with Springdale Cinema LLC related to the redevelopment of the property located at 505 West Crescentville Road and declaring an emergency. Whereas NAI Entertainment Holdings is currently the owner of the real property known as Hamilton County parcel numbers 59900300332 and 59900300333 with a mailing address of 505 West Crescentville Road in Springdale, Ohio, the property. And whereas Springdale Cinema LLC, the developer, plans to purchase the property from the owner and construct a multifamily housing development on the property consisting of approximately 216 market apartment units, 90 for-rent townhome units, and associated amenities. And whereas the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio passed ordinance numbers 45, 2018 and 05, 2021, which established the boundaries of the City of Springdale Community Reinvestment Area, which was formed pursuant to chapters 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code. And whereas the property is located within the area designated as the city's community reinvestment area. And whereas the developer has applied for incentives from the city available under chapters 3735 of the Ohio Revised Code related to the development proposed on the property. And whereas the city seeks to enter into a community reinvestment agreement with the developer that will grant a tax exemption for real property improvements with job creation and other benchmarks at the property. And whereas the community reinvestment agreement with the developer will further the goal of the city's community reinvestment area legislation by encouraging economic stability and generating new employment opportunities. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1. The mayor and city administrator are hereby authorized to enter into a community reinvestment agreement with Springdale Cinema LLC related to the property located at 505 West Crescentville Road in the city of Springdale, which grants a tax exemption for real property improvements with job creation and other benchmarks, the agreement. A copy of the agreement is attached as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2. That this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that this ordinance shall be effective from and after the earliest period allowed by law. Section 4, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall be effective immediately upon its passage. The reason for said declaration of emergency is the need to execute the incentive agreement in order to meet deadlines related to the financing and redevelopment of the property.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 65, 2024. It does have the emergency clause. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Brown, if you poll council on ordinance number 65, 2024.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 65, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right, moving on to ordinance number 66, 2024. This also has the emergency clause. Mr. Jacobs.
Ordinance number 66, 2024. An ordinance establishing priority of property tax exemptions granted for parcels of real property located at 505 West Crescentville Road within the city of Springdale, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Whereas by passage of ordinance number 2024 on December 18, 2024, the CRA ordinance, Council of the City of Springdale, the council approved a community reinvestment area agreement pursuant to Ohio Revised Code sections 3735.66 et seq, exempting a percentage of improvements to the real property located at 505 West Crescentville Road within the city of Springdale, Ohio. Such real property as more fully set forth in Exhibit A, attached hereto being the property. And whereas by passage of this ordinance, number 2024 on December 18, 2024, this council also declared improvements to the property to be a public purpose and exempt from real property taxation pursuant to section 5709.40B of the Ohio Revised Code, the TIF ordinance. And whereas pursuant to the provisions of section 5709.911 of the Ohio Revised Code, this council desires to establish the priority order of the real property tax exemptions granted by the CRA ordinance and the TIF ordinance. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, the recitals to this ordinance are hereby incorporated by reference. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and determines that this property shall be subject to exemption from real property taxes in the following order. A, the exemption granted by the CRA ordinance shall have priority over B, the exemption granted by the TIF ordinance. For the avoidance of doubt and to the maximum extent allowable by law, the exemptions are intended to run concurrently, with the exemption of the CRA ordinance having priority over the exemption affected by the TIF ordinance. To the extent the CRA ordinance does not provide an exemption, for example, with respect to the land component of incremental value to the property, it is intended that such value would be exempted under the TIF ordinance during the same period, provided such value would have otherwise been exempt under the TIF ordinance, all other things being equal. Section 3. The clerk of council is hereby directed to forward a copy of this ordinance to the Hamilton County Auditor. Section 4. It is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including Ohio Revised Code section 121.22. Section 5, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D3D of the Charter, be effective immediately. The reason for the declaration of emergency is the immediate need to move forward with the proposed economic development incentives at the earliest possible date to meet financing and redevelopment deadlines related to the proposed project. Section 6, this ordinance shall take effect and be enforced from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 66, 2024. It does have the emergency clause. What is your pleasure?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? I'd see none. Ms. Browder, if you poll council.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 66, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes, which I think is the end of our tranche of ordinances related to Center Project. And once again, thank you for choosing Springdale again. We're glad you're back. All right, council, we can move on now to ordinance number 66, 2024. I'm sorry, we just did that. 67, 2024. It is a first reading. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 67, 2024. An ordinance adopting a supplemental appropriation.
I'm sorry, just to correct, I had mentioned that it's first reading. It is a financial ordinance, so we will be able to act on it tonight. I just want to make sure as you're hearing it, know that we will act on this tonight. Please, Mr. Jacobs.
Ordinance number 67, 2024. An ordinance adopting a supplemental appropriation estimated receipts ordinance to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures and adjust estimated receipts for the city of Springdale, Ohio for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2024. Whereas supplemental appropriations are necessary at this time to provide for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Springdale during fiscal year 2024. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that in order to provide for the current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Springdale for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2024, the following sums be and are hereby set aside and appropriated as adjusted. The legal level of budgetary control for annual appropriation purposes is as follows. The general fund at the department level, personal service expenditures and all other expenditures. All other funds at the fund level, personal service expenditures and all other expenditures. The general fund departmental level is hereby defined as documented in the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated here by reference. Adjustments to the general fund at the legal level of budgetary control are documented in that attached Exhibit B, which is incorporated here by reference. The final 2024 appropriations at the legal level of budgetary control as defined above are included as documented in the attached Exhibit C, which is incorporated by reference. Also, that in order to provide for the current budget receipts, estimated receipts are hereby adjusted for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2024. Section 2, that additional appropriations be made to the following funds. General Fund 010, 085, and 086, $1,242,466. Section 3, that estimated receipts be increased to the following funds. 1 Ohio Opioid Fund 065, $45,130. Grants Fund 070, $54,092. Drug Law Enforcement 081, $10,543. DUI Fund 083, $1,810. Law Enforcement Training Fund 084, $35,833. Parks and Urban Forestry 094, $8,330. Unclaimed Monies Fund 096, $19,401. Section 4, that the Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is hereby authorized to draw warrants for payments from any of the foregoing appropriations upon receiving proper certificates approved by the Mayor or City Administrator or upon effectiveness of an ordinance of council to make the expenditures, provided that no warrants shall be drawn or paid for salaries or wages except to persons employed by authority of and in accordance with law or ordinance. Provided further, that the appropriations for contingencies can only be expended upon approval of a 2/3 vote of council for items of expense constituting a legal obligation against the city and for purposes other than those covered by other specific appropriations herein made. Section 5, that it is found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the adoption of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of any of its committees which resulted in such formal action were in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including Section 121.22 Ohio Revised Code and the rules of this council adopted in accordance herewith. Section 6, that this ordinance shall take effect and be enforced from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 67, 2024. It is a financial ordinance and can be acted on tonight. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Brown, if you poll council.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 67, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right, next up is ordinance number 68, 2024. Again, a financial ordinance that can be acted on tonight. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 68, 2024. An ordinance adopting a temporary appropriation for the period January 1, 2025 until the fiscal year 2025 appropriation permanent ordinance is adopted by City Council. Whereas it is necessary to adopt a temporary appropriation ordinance for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Springdale for the period January 1, 2025 until the permanent fiscal year 2025 appropriation ordinance is adopted. And whereas there will be sufficient receipts to meet those needs, now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that a temporary appropriation is hereby adopted to provide for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Springdale for the period January 1, 2025 until the permanent fiscal year 2025 appropriation ordinance is adopted. Section 2, that said appropriations are as follows. $800,000 to the general fund, funds 010, 085, and 086. $25,000 to the street maintenance, repair, and construction fund 061. $75,000 to the state highway fund 062. Section 3, the Finance Officer Tax Commissioner is hereby authorized to draw warrants or for payments from any of the foregoing appropriations upon receiving proper certificates and vouchers herefor. Section 4, that it is found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the adoption of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and any of its committees which resulted in such formal action were in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code and the rules of this council adopted in accordance therewith. Section 5, that this ordinance shall take effect and be in force from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
And just for clarity, I believe when we were reading the State Highway Fund 062, it was $7,500, in case that was misread, just so we all understand what was read, in case that was misspoke earlier. All right, Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 68, 2024. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, Ms. Brown, if you poll council.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 68, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes. All right, we're getting through it. Next, we have ordinance number 69, 2024. It does have the emergency clause. Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 69, 2024. An ordinance amending ordinance number 55, 2023 to provide for wage increases for certain city employees and declaring an emergency. Whereas the City of Springdale, the city periodically adjusts compensation paid to city employees, and whereas Ordinance 55, 2023 is the most recent ordinance which established compensation rates for certain city employees. Now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that ordinance number 55, 2023 is hereby amended to reflect wage increases for certain city employees as set forth in the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated here by reference. Section 2, the revised compensation to be paid to city employees contained in the attached Exhibit A shall be effective December 29th, 2024. Section 3, Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with the applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 4, that this ordinance shall take effect from and after the earliest time allowed by law. Section 5, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D, 3D of the Charter, be effective immediately. The reason for said declaration of emergency is the need for proper pay grades to be in place at the beginning of calendar year 2025 and to allow for continuity of services to the public.
Council, you've heard the reading of ordinance number 69, 2024. It does have the emergency clause. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, Ms. Brown, if you poll council.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Ordinance number 69, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes. And I'll add a thank you to all of our city workers for it. I know I certainly appreciate the work you do, and we all do, so thank you. All right, next up we have resolution number 14, 2024. Mr. Jacobs.
Resolution number R14, 2024. A resolution confirming the mayor's appointment of Rita Hart as a member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending November 30th, 2026. Whereas a vacancy will occur in the City of Springdale Board of Health as a result of the expiration of a current member's term, which expires December 31st, 2024. And whereas the mayor has announced the appointment of Rita Hart as a member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending December 31st, 2026. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, with members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that Rita Hart be and is hereby confirmed as a member of the City of Springdale Board of Health for the term ending December 31, 2026. Section 2, Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that this resolution shall take effect and be in force from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of resolution 14, 2024. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to say Ms. Hart has been a longtime resident of the city of Springdale with her husband, raised her son Ryan here as a graduate of Princeton High School. She was the Princeton High School nurse for a long period of time as well, and has served our city well on the Board of Health, and looking for her to continue on and look for council support. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, Ms. Browder, if you poll council?
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Resolution 14, 2024 passes with 5 affirmative votes. Next up on the agenda, we have the Resolution 15 that we've added. Mr. Brown, if I can ask a procedure question, can we do nominations before the first reading with the blank to save Mr. Jacobs some of his voice, or do we need to read it with the blank first?
You can do the nominations.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we stay above board on that. All right, so in deference to Mr. Jacobs, our next resolution, 15, 2024, is a resolution to appoint a serving member to Springdale's Civil Service Commission. At this point, the floor is open for nominations for this position. Mr. Vanover.
Thank you, Mr. President. I take great honor in nominating Mr. Robert Coleman to the position on civil service. He has served us extremely well for a number of times, and he is an integral part of that committee.
Full agreement there. Any other nominations? All right, hearing none, and then by acclamation, we will read Resolution 15, 2024 with Mr. Robert Coleman inserted in for the blank. I'm sorry, just officially, I've closed nominations at this point, and now we'll insert it. All right, Mr. Jacobs, when you're ready.
Resolution R15, 2024, a resolution appointing Robert Coleman to serve as a member of the City of Springdale Civil Service Commission for the term ending December 31, 2027. Whereas a vacancy will occur in the City of Springdale Civil Service Commission for the term ending December 31, 2024. And whereas the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio has determined that Robert Coleman shall be appointed to fill the vacancy and serve as a member of the City of Springdale Civil Service Commission for the term ending December 31, 2027. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that Robert Coleman be and is hereby appointed to serve as a member of the City of Springdale Civil Service Commission for the term ending December 31, 2027. Section 2, Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, this resolution shall take effect and be enforced from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
Council, you've heard the reading of Resolution 15, 2024. What is your pleasure?
Motion to adopt.
Move it. Second.
I moved in second. Questions or discussion? Just because there's no lights doesn't mean I'm not going to take an opportunity to thank you, Mr. Coleman, for the work that you do. You're in here every month as an unelected person that does so much for the city. The meetings you go to and the rigor that you go through, making sure our positions are filled is truly appreciated, and not enough people see that work. So I just want to say thank you again from the dais. It is very much appreciated. So with that, Ms. Browder, if you poll council.
Mr. Gleaves?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye. Resolution R15, 2024 is passed with 5 affirmative votes. And I have no doubt that you would have got the other 2 votes if they were here as well. Thank you, Mr. Coleman. All right. That ends our ordinances resolutions. Next, we'll move on to old business. Is there any old business anyone would like to bring to council? Mr. Jacobs.
A question for administration. I'm not sure if you can answer. Is there any update on the prosecution of the nail bandit that you could give?
Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't tell you for Hamilton County, haven't looked that up, or we haven't talked about that for a while. I believe he was already sentenced in Butler County, and that matter was resolved, but that was a misdemeanor, and Hamilton County had a felony. So we can check it out and let you know shortly.
Thank you.
All right. Any other old business? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Is there any new business anyone on council would like to bring forward? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to meetings and announcements. Mr. Vanover.
Thank you, Mr. President. We all are awaiting a December 25th meeting, so, from the big guy himself. So just take this quick, brief moment to wish everybody in Springdale a very Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year.
Mr. Yule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just announcement for our government offices on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve will be open until 2 p.m. on both days, for both New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve.
Ms. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Civil Service Commission will kick off the new year on January 2nd at 2 p.m.
They just had to get a meeting in before council. I see how it is. Mr. Gleaves.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Board of Zoning Appeals is scheduled to meet here in these chambers at 7 p.m. January 28th, 2025.
All right, and as a reminder, our what would have been our January 1st City Council meeting has been pushed back to January 2nd at 7 p.m. in these chambers, so one day later at the same time, just as a reminder that that's happening. All right, next we'll move on to communications from the audience. If anyone would like to address council for any reason, the floor is now open for communications from the audience. Second call. Third and final call. All right, I'm closing communications from the audience. Next, we'll turn to Mr. Jacobs for a recap of legislative items and legislation in development in the order that he sees fit.
Council, as you review your legislative summary, item 1 was addressed by Ordinance 62, 2024, a second reading authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into an agreement with CT Consultants Incorporated for design and engineering for the East Kemper Road Improvements Phase 1 project for the city of Springdale, Ohio. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 2 was addressed with Resolutions R14, 2024, confirming the mayor's appointment of Rita Hart to the Springdale Board of Health, and Resolution R15, 2024, appointing Robert Coleman to serve on the Civil Service Commission. Both passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 3 was addressed by Ordinance 67, 2024, adopting the final appropriation and transfer ordinance for 2024. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 4 was addressed by Ordinance 68, 2024, adopting a temporary appropriations ordinance for the period January 1, 2025 until the fiscal year 2025 appropriations permanent ordinance is adopted by City Council. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 5 was addressed by Ordinance 69, 2024, an ordinance amending Ordinance Number 55, 2023 to provide for wage increases for certain city employees and declaring an emergency. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 7 was addressed by Ordinance 63, 2024, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a development agreement with respect to the Springdale Cinema Project, the execution of ancillary development-related documents, including a school compensation agreement with the Princeton City School District and Joint Vocational District, and a cooperative agreement with one or more port authorities, and declaring an emergency. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 8 was addressed by Ordinance 64, 2024, declaring improvements to parcels of real property located in Springdale, Ohio to be a public purpose under Section 5709.40B of the Ohio Revised Code, exempting such improvements from real property taxation, declaring certain public improvements to be necessary for the further development of those parcels, establishing a tax increment equivalent fund, and declaring an emergency. That passed with 5 affirmative votes as well. Item 9 was addressed by Ordinance 65, 2024, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to execute a community reinvestment agreement with Springdale Cinema LLC related to the redevelopment of the property located at 505 West Carsonville Road, and declaring an emergency. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. Item 10 was addressed by Ordinance 66, 2024, an ordinance establishing priority of property tax exemption granted for parcels of real property located at 505 West Carsonville Road within the city of Springdale, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. That passed with 5 affirmative votes. And just double checking. Items still in development include Item 6, an ordinance amending Section 153.252 F6C of the Springdale Code of Ordinance regulating the husbandry of fowl, rabbits, and bees is in development. Item 11, an ordinance adopting the annual appropriation estimated receipts for fiscal year ending December 31, 2025 is in development. Item 12, a resolution authorizing the investment of municipal funds is in development. Item 13, a resolution requesting advance payment from the Hamilton County Auditor will come before us at the January meeting. Item 14, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into a business incentive grant agreement with the owner of Slick City Entertainment will come before this council in January, or at our January meeting. Item 15, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into a job retention and creation incentive program agreement with Salas O'Brien Incorporated will come before council in January at our first meeting. Item 16, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and city administrator to enter into a job retention and creation incentive program agreement with Mitchell's Salon and Day Spa will come before council on January 2nd. And all other issues are forthcoming unless administration has anything.
Mayor Hawkins, did you have something to add?
Not with regard to that, just wanted to give an update from Mr. Jacobs' question.
Please.
Gather some information real quick. Mr. Dyson's got a jury trial set for January the 13th of this coming year. So that's the latest on what he's got going on in terms of Hamilton County.
Thank you.
Cross that off our to-do list. Mr. Gleaves.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to commend Councilmember Jacobs for getting through this tonight. Last night, we were together, the BZA meeting. He could not speak hardly at all. Fantastic job, and thank you for what you did tonight.
Thank you. And before we adjourn, I want to add my best wishes. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate around this time of year. Anyone out there and everyone on the dais, I wish everyone a happy holiday and a happy New Year next year. And we will be back again in a couple weeks. And with that, we have item 17.
So moved.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.